Broadway, listen to the Broadway Beat. Broadway makes you want to move your feet. Everybody's tapping into everything that's happening on Broadway Beat. Broadway Beat. Broadway Beat. Broadway Beat.
Hello, I'm Richard Ridge for Broadway Beat. This season's most stunning theatrical event is the National Theatre of Great Britain's production of War Horse, presented in conjunction with Lincoln Center Theatre at the Vivian Beaumont. The cast of 35 includes Seth Numrich and Peter Herman. We're here at opening night to celebrate with the company.
And the year turns around again. But like barley corn that new rose from the grave, a new year will rise.
Well, it's a simple story. It's a story about a boy and a horse. I guess a boy whose best friend is a horse, and they get separated. And that's really a simple love story that anyone can understand. We've all had some sort of experience a bit like that, either with an animal or with a human, it doesn't matter. But then that story is set in the context of a really brutal war, and a war which, crucially, when they set off to take part in it, the vast majority of people had no idea of what it might involve. Even the generals in the First World War thought that they'd be able to charge through the enemy positions with cavalry and just win in a matter of months. And of course the reality was horribly opposite to that.
I think this is a story which just has found its time, and it's very sad that it's found its time, because when it came out I think it was thought to be maybe a bit old-fashioned because it was about an old war, and maybe it was a bit nostalgic. And it came out at the time when we were all deep in the Cold War, and Britain, at any rate, was not fighting a war that was on the television in your sitting room in the evening. And it's not like that anymore. And I think that's the big difference.
Well, basically, I make the puppets move like horses. So I choreograph all the movements for all the gaits, all the walks, all the ear twitches, the head movements. So basically, I live in the country, so I have horses at the end of my garden. So I study them, and I just happen to be lucky enough to know about horses.
Well, audiences here are quite vocal. That's a wonderful thing to experience. You know, if somebody points a gun at the horse, they say, no, don't do it. That's a thrilling thing to be part of when you're sitting there. And we're very proud of the fact that the play takes them to that extreme, to have that kind of response.
And an understanding, I think, of war, a reciprocity with war that's happening now, and an understanding that these wars have been happening over centuries. This is a century-old war that people really identify with as much as they might a war in Afghanistan or Iraq. It's part of our lives, and people respond to what's happening in the war, both in a contemporary sense and in a historical sense.
If Joey's going, then I'm going too. I'm volunteering.
How old are you?
19, sir.
Is that the truth?
16, sir.
Joey's quite a horse, isn't he? I've seen you riding him, and I've sketched him. I'll show you one day. We could do with men like you, Albert. You're spirited the way he is. But you're not old enough. So your place is at home with your father, and Joey's is with the army. You have my word as an officer that he'll be well cared for. He'll be my mount, Albert. So I'll care for him myself. That's a promise.
It's like taking a slow, meditative stroll with your grandmother across a football field during a championship game. I mean, it's this, you have this gentle, intimate sort of relationship between people, and then this crazy, violent, bone-crunching rush through. Rehearsal was like that, performances are like that, and backstage, is certainly like that. You should see it. That's the real show, backstage.
It's a show that relies upon some really traditional techniques of storytelling, which feels great in such a in the atmosphere of Broadway, where technical tricks and gimmickry rules. It's nice to be around beautiful craftsmanship puppets and traditional storytelling techniques.
35 people on stage is remarkable. It's remarkable. And being on stage and being backstage with all those people and the crew, and everybody's constantly going all the time. If you're not on stage, you're doing a quick change backstage. And it never stops until the curtain or the bow happens. And that's, it's a gas.
An absolute joy. It really has been. It's been tremendous. In a lot of theatrical experiences, which I've had a lot, people talk about this ensemble idea, and this probably is the best ensemble, the truest ensemble I've ever really worked with. That alone, plus the fact that you're dealing with these magical ideas of animals puppeted by people, geese, and it's a joy. It's an absolute joy, and I get to be the bad guy, and it's still fun.
But how long will he be gone? Few months at most. We have to nip this threat in the bud, Albert. The Germans are already in France. We don't stop them now. Who knows where they'll go next? You're helping us to bring this war to a swift end.
And then I can buy him back, sir, after it's over.
You can buy him back. Captain Stewart. Sir? Say goodbye to him now.
No, sir. Right now?
Say goodbye, Albert.
Sure, I'm Jonathan David Martin. I play Joey's heart.
I'm Jesslyn Kelly. I play Joey's hind.
I'm Prentice Oniemi, and I play Joey's head.
The question I want to ask you is, what was the easiest thing for you to learn to do as Joey, and what was the hardest thing for you to show as Joey?
Oh, well, that's actually easy. Both answers are to breathe. The easiest thing was to make the puppet breathe, because it's just, for me anyway, it's literally bobbing up and down with my knees. And the hardest thing to really make real and bring the puppet to life is the breath. And it begins there, and it really does end there.
And for you?
I would say, for me, it's quite similar. In the position that I'm in, which is behind both of my team members here in the rear of the horse, in addition to the breath, there's kind of a more subtle energy to connect the three of us. And I think that was something that to some extent comes naturally, but also it's the thing that I have to constantly remind myself to check in with, and that's what keeps us all together, I think.
And for you?
I'd say stillness. Initially, when I didn't know the puppet very well, I would just sort of hold it up there and make sure that I was having the right footfalls with the group to make sure that things looked together. And then as I learned the puppet, I kept wanting to do more and take advantage of all of the stuff that I'd learned through the process. But then in order to properly tell the story, stillness is so essential. It really lets people into Joey's thought process.
I play Albert Narracott, who's a young man who sort of falls in love with his pet horse, and then when the horse is sold to the army, I go after him and join the army to try and find him. And I love everything about this material. When I auditioned for the play, I read Michael Morpurgo's book, which is the inspiration for the play, and was just blown away by the story and the characters and the character of Joey, who kind of guides us through this play, and the fact that he's a horse and such an unusual narrator of a story. But then reading the script, reading the play, and then every step along the process, the auditions, meeting with Tom Morris and Marianne, Elliott, the designers, everything has been incredible, and I couldn't be happier. I feel like the luckiest actor in the world to be working on this.
I play the role of Billy Narracott, who is a bit misguided. He is following in his father's footsteps in terms of following this family rivalry, and then gets shipped off to war, and you see this destruction of somebody who's very cocky and confident, and then turns rather cowardly at the horrors of war in front of him.
It's a huge privilege to work with Tom and Marianne. It's a huge privilege to work with Adrian and Basil and their level of imagination and artistry, and I have to say I didn't know what it would be like to try to let the weight of a war rest on my shoulders, and that was quite an experience. And it's very humbling to let even a fraction of what that is like rest on us, and to try to bear that up and try to honor that.